My name is Tom Whitby. I am the founder of EdChat, if you know what that is. And also an author of The Relevant Educator, which deals with collaborative, teachers using collaboration for professional development and gaining control of their own learning as far as professional development goes, which is one of the reasons why they asked me to head up this panel, I thought. We'll soon find out. We're going to do things a little differently. It's not going to be a panel discussion as you know it. I have found out there's a movement in the United States called EdCamp. And in the EdCamp movement, generally what happens is you go there for professional development, but everything is based around conversation. And we know adult learning is different from the way children learn, and the best way adults learn is through conversation. So one of the things we want to do here is create a conversation atmosphere. And in order to do that, we're going to have to limit ourselves in questions and answers. So we as a group are going to start out with explanations of who we are to begin with, and then we're going to talk about the ecosystem in education. And then we're going to start a conversation with ourselves, and then we're going to open it up to you. If you have a question for the group, please limit yourself to 30 seconds on the question. If you want to make a statement, please limit yourself to a minute. And if we all do that and we all abide by those rules, we should have a very healthy conversation by the time we leave here after an hour. Any questions? Okay. We're going to have the panel introduce themselves, and we're going to start off with Ann to my left, and my order is completely off after that, so they'll introduce themselves, and then you'll be able to follow along. Ann?
Okay, hello, I'm Mroz. I'm editor of TES, or TES, however you want to say it. I often get confused myself, which is a weekly magazine, and about half of that is written by the teachers themselves from all over the world, so anyone who wants to contribute, give me a shout. But probably what most teachers will know it for is the global website, which has 7 million registered users, over 800,000 teaching resources and lesson plans from all over the world, and over 1 million downloads per day.
Hello, everyone. I am Barnett. I'm the founder of the Center for Teaching Quality, a small nonprofit based in North Carolina in the States with a pretty broad reach to connect, ready, and mobilize teachers so they can transform their own profession. We imagine high-quality education for all kids, driven by the bold ideas and best practices of teachers themselves. And we think this thing called the internet that's not going away, and we're already beginning to draw on it in pretty powerful ways, like many other people here on this panel and in the audience, to connect and ready teachers so they can indeed do what's best for kids.
Okay. My name is Lachlan MacKinnon, and I'm the director for teacher training programs for the Varkey Foundation. We run programs predominantly in Africa, teaching directly to the teachers there and the head teachers. We use also distance technology as well. We're actually in the middle of looking at a platform now to see how we can engage teachers in the distant technology as well as running the one in Uganda. So that's my background, and that's where I am.
My name is Kimmelman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bridge International Academies. We are a large education company that serves families who live on less than $2 a day around the world. Currently, we have about 412 schools serving 120,000 pupils in Kenya and Uganda, and we're expanding into Nigeria and India shortly. We currently employ about 5,000 teachers, and so have thought a lot and done a lot of work on how to enable and support those teachers to be successful in the classroom.
Excellent. When they started to put this panel together, the one sentence that they used to describe the panel was, networks appear to be key to sharing teaching best practices and also learning. What models of networks show the most impact? We'll start off with that as the initial question. Anybody want to tackle that?
Well, I'll quickly jump into this, and this goes for both face-to-face networks and virtual networks. Those that work best are driven by teachers themselves. They focus on teachers' strengths and needs. They focus more on inquiry, not just data. Data's a tool, it's not the main purpose. And they promote critical dissent amongst teachers, critical friendship in driving best practices. We know how to create this, we just need more systems in place, the ecosystem, to build more demand for this type of professional learning.
I mean, what I'd like to, I suppose, focus on in the ecosystems is teachers are the centre. And I think even some of the panels that I've been on watched just recently, we talk about big policy being made and working through that centre. But for me, it's about starting in the classroom. So that ecosystem that the teachers actually need. I work in Africa, as I've mentioned earlier, so there's a different aspect to the way teachers are feeling in those classroom environments. And sometimes that system is about giving them the collective belief that they can actually make a difference and do it themselves. They don't need the Mzungu, which is what I am. They call me a Mzungu in Africa, which is the white man. They don't need me. And I tell them they don't need me in the school. I can bring some knowledge, and then we train people on the ground to help continue that knowledge. But the ecosystem, I think, has to start at that point. We need to look at what their needs are. In some cases, it's simple as go and talk to the teacher in the other room. They haven't got that belief that they can do it. And then moving from that, bringing in your head teachers, and your ecosystem starts to build. If you like, it's a network. You can call it ecosystem, you can call it a network. It builds from that aspect and it goes on from there, so you start to look at the system that goes beyond that, which is the school next door. How do we start bringing in that learning community? Now you're starting to build a community of people. You're starting to build that ecosystem where they have a self-belief in what they can do. And I think that's, I mean, I'll stop at that point, but I think that is a trigger. We need to go much further than that, but I'll let others talk on.
Tom, can I quickly just say something? To build on this brilliant point. Many times the schools in which teachers are teaching are ill-suited for them to spread their expertise. That's more the norm than the exception. The culture's not there.
Absolutely.
They're afraid to even go next door.
Yeah.
Sometimes the virtual community, which we have seen, has created agency for teachers who are working in more toxic school cultures to build the confidence and the skill set to go next door and then begin to change their own schools. So that's one reason why we are so hopeful about this thing called the internet and teachers.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think, the internet and a lot of these networks that are starting to come up are and can be extremely powerful for teachers. I think they can become especially powerful when they're undergirded by actually measuring what works, right? So there's an enormous amount of ability to share, which is fantastic and very motivating. The best things to share are things that have been proven to work in someone's classroom or in someone's school or in someone's school system. And so I think where the power really becomes relevant is when you can actually say, hey, this actually works. We've measured it. How about you see how this might work for you or adapt it in your environment? So I think a lot of this also needs to start with how are we measuring the success of various interventions and work that's happening in many classrooms around the world, and then how do we share those that have been most successful? And I think that's really the critical missing element.
Anne?
Well, I'll probably echo everything everyone said, but I think it's definitely has to come from the teacher, and it's even better if it comes from the grassroots.
Yes.
And that they just look after whatever they're doing themselves, that they do their own peer review, they do their own rating on their own lesson plans and whatever they produce, and that they do look at the evidence themselves. I mean, there is a man in the audience there who runs an organisation called Research Ed. And basically, Research Ed is that man. And that is, that is looking at all the research around. And I think every teacher will know, and as every journalist knows, there's loads of research. And it all contradicts itself. So how does the teacher know which one to believe? And so that's all about making teachers research literate and working with the academic community. So you have an even bigger collaboration there.
Well, and that kind of begs the larger ecosystem. Are teachers prepared as researchers and inquiries in their pre-service preparation? Do they have time and space to conduct inquiry in the course of their school day? We know in top-performing nations around the world, teachers teach about half the amount of time that teachers teach on a weekly basis in many other parts of the world. We've got to use the time properly, but we've got to also build structures so these emerging networks that have so much potential can actually have the large effect we want them to have.
Yeah,
I think time is critical because, I mean, in the vast majority of school systems, you know, the teacher is present with the pupils throughout most of the day, right? They're doing the main work of being a teacher, which is engaging with the pupils in a meaningful learning experience. And so the amount of time that's actually allocated, or even in any reasonable length day, to be able to dig in and for the research, to do the development, et cetera, is pretty limited. So this might be controversial, but I'll bring it up, which is, so our approach to try to enable teachers to be successful in the classroom but still have the ability to leverage world-class instruction pedagogy is to actually have a division of labor. So we have what we call classroom teachers who work in the classroom whose job it is to leverage the content out there to engage with the children in a meaningful instructional experience. And then we have master teachers and pedagogical and curriculum developers who are designing and testing curriculum that is then distributed to the classroom teachers. And by having that division of labor, you're able to have teachers spend a lot more time specializing either in engagement in the classroom or in the development of the content. You know, we have teams that spend 15 hours per 40-minute lesson developing the content, and then another team of individuals who are obviously delivering that.
Can I ask Jay a question? Are the master teachers still teaching kids at least part of the day or week?
So their main job is not teaching, but they go into the classroom to test, and then it's a feedback loop with the classroom teachers themselves.
So I'm going to up the ante on this.
Please.
It's a good first step, but what we need are more teachers in hybrid roles, because we know from research that teachers are most likely to be influenced in the best of ways from other teachers who are teaching the same types of children. We also know that, at least in the States, about 700,000 teachers, according to a recent survey, would like to be in these hybrid roles, and it's a good way to retain our best talent. And we also know that teachers lose their pedagogical touch very quickly when they get out of the classroom. So the master teacher may be asking to help a new teacher or a struggling teacher do something that the master teacher has never done before. And so we're calling for what we even call teacherpreneurs, teachers who have time and space, a reduced teaching load, still teaching kids, but can incubate and execute their own ideas and drive system change.
One of the things that always bothers me, I know U.S. education, you know, not anything about the UK, you know, some stuff about the UK, but one of the things that's always bothered me is where professional development fits into the system. If in fact, in the US, if professional development were working as it should be, we wouldn't be sitting here having the conversations that we're having. So obviously, it doesn't work.
Correct.
We've always had collaboration. From the beginning of learning, we've always collaborated. But we were limited in time and space. You had to be face-to-face with a person in order to collaborate. The game changer in all of this has been technology. Right. And technology has broken down the barriers of time and space, so we can collaborate with anybody, anywhere, at any time. Hence the global connections that we now have. How do we get schools to change the description or the work day of a teacher or the work week of a teacher so that professional development is incorporated into that?
Well, everything that we want to do, almost in any aspect when it comes to improving teaching and the teaching profession, is being done somewhere in the world. The problem is there are very few places that put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And I think the main reason folks do not do, or people do not do what they could do, is they don't know what to do or have never seen it before. So how do we make the best policies and practices most visible? We're trying to help teachers themselves deliver those messages through a variety of social media right now, because we think teachers are profound messengers, not only for their colleagues, but for parents and business leaders as well.
Can I just make a point that PD does work?
Okay.
I think we have to understand that it does work. Teachers need professional development. They're lifelong learners. We expect them to be lifelong learners. We expect them to understand the learners of their children. So there's a whole litany of what a good teacher looks like. So professional development, from my perspective, it does work, but it has to be contextualised, and it's like methodology. So methodology is contextualised to the grade, to the student, to the class number, from 25 kids in a class to, in Africa, we've got 150 kids in a class. So the concept that doesn't work is a bit beyond me. I think we can do it, but it's a matter of just making sure that we're putting in place the right steps to make sure it does work. So I talked earlier that we instead of the program that we did in the professional development, we started from the bottom up, and we worked all the way through. But it's also bringing in the teachers of the teachers, and making sure that they. Am I interrupting something?
No.
Okay, sorry. There was a bit of something else happening at the back. Oh, there's a question maybe. I think it's important that one, it's contextualised and it's robust. Whatever PD we're actually going to run through, it's got to be followed up. The one thing you find with any PD model, if there isn't, you can deliver as much PD, that's the easy bit. To be honest, that's the easiest part that we do. The follow-up is actually the hard part, but that's the part that has the greatest impact. When we start doing the follow-up, going into schools, and sometimes it's not a matter of monitoring and being the police of what it was, it's just sometimes a physical body in a school to go, they recognise that what we just did in that PD is important, they're coming back to see how well we're going. And teachers, they need those three things. They need pay, we all know that, we always want to be paid more. They want adequate pay, but they want professional development. And if they get the professional development, they get the third is what they want as motivator, and that is recognition. Because you're giving them professional development because you believe that they're important enough to do it. So it's each country, and this is where there's no one solution, and I think there's never ever one. Technology is a great part of this. You can MOOC courses, you can push the content, create those flipped classrooms. But at the end of the day, for me, the one aspect that, especially in Africa, because technology is not always there, is the people. And keeping that connection, those social relationships of the people that come with it. Yeah?
All right, we do have a question in the back. I'm going to point to you.
Thank you. So building on from your question about how to engage teachers in professional development, teaching can be quite an isolating and time-consuming job. How do you engage them at all in your networks? And have you noticed differences in patterns in how teachers have been using your networks? But how do you engage the ones that are isolated and don't have time?
Well, the key for us, Leonora, is preparing more and supporting more of the teachers in the community to be what we call virtual community organizers. And we raise philanthropic funds to pay those teachers to be those facilitators. Because as fancy as the technology gets, and it's getting even fancier, more sophisticated, if you will, it's really about relationships and trust. And just by building a fancy platform, you're not going to necessarily create the kind of learning community or the outcomes that you're looking for. Jay?
Can I pick up on that point? Because I think it's the trust one is really, really important. Because on the TES Resources website, the reason why it's so successful with teachers is because the content is from other teachers, and they trust what another teacher has contributed. And they're not really that interested in any fancy technology.
Correct.
Most of the lesson plans and resources on the site are still PowerPoints, and quite basic PowerPoints, but it's all about the content of that. They don't want it to be all singing and dancing. They want to know that a teacher used it in their classroom and it worked, and they will adapt it for their classroom. They won't use it exactly because they know it may not work in that form, so they take it and they adapt it for the children that they're teaching.
Well, unfortunately, in the United States, the model for much of the professional development is somebody will come in and teach the bells and whistles of a product and say, here, take it and go to the classroom and use it. That's the professional development. Rather than saying to the teacher, what is it you do? and let's look at this product and see if it can make you more efficient and more effective in what you do. If they did that, then they would get more mileage out of what it is they're doing, but they're not. They're just throwing out the bells and whistles and expecting the teachers to take off with that. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Professional development in the United States is a good example of how we spend money on something that doesn't work. Not that money does matter. We spend about $18 billion on professional development in the United States, and it's very difficult to account for hardly any of it, and teachers are very dissatisfied with what they get, and that's the primary model. They're getting something. They're not driving something.
Right.
And that's what teachers want.
Well, gaining control of your own learning as a teacher is a
Right.
very important thing to do, and it's new.
And not
it's
all-
new to them
Yeah.
because they've never been able to do this.
And not all teachers are ready for this, but
No.
let me tell you, there are, in the States, I will tell you, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of teachers who are more than ready and are so underutilized to drive the professional learning of their colleagues. So,
I think it's probably pretty similar in England that there's not great enthusiasm for the CPD because it's so mixed. The quality is really, really mixed, and so many people have had really bad experiences. And there was an interesting slide from Andreas Schleicher yesterday in which asking about teachers around the world whether they wanted CPD, and UK was really, really low. And I don't think that's because they don't want CPD. Their experience of it has been so bad that they don't want any more. If CPD is like that, they don't want any more of it. We might have to call it something else.
And it comes back to the trust that you talked about earlier, and the trust that the teacher has in the trainer that's out the front. So, one of the things we make sure we do is that the trainers are people on the ground. They know what it's like to teach in a class of 150. So it becomes more relevant and contextualised because of it, and they can see it and believe it. And then we follow it up. But I think it's also understanding that there's a power in the cluster of schools that you can bring together. So when you start building that ecosystem that we talked about, and you've come up and you've got a collection of schools, it's the power of that group that is going to create the professional community that you want, and to use the best practices within those. And I think we sometimes underestimate what they can do without us. You don't always have to have intervention. It's just giving them the ability to go, yes, you can. And that's sometimes all teachers want, is someone to trust, as we talked about, and go, yeah, this is what we can. We find the time. It's always going to be difficult. Every school system is different, and trying to find time, professional development within school time is always a nightmare. But there are ways of doing it. And each system will come up with a different way. You've presented some of them, and each system will, because it's contextualised. And this is the thing we have to keep. Remember, scale has got to do with the contextualised nature of it. What works in Uganda is not going to work here, but it can work in different parts of Uganda and so forth around. So I think it's important to collect those things, but make sure that we're not trying to fit something into the US that doesn't fit the US,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Right.
So, or the UK or Uganda, it's in a sense, Africa. But come back to that system of teachers within. When they start trusting each other and working together, it's a powerful thing.
Well, I think that's what social media has done. It's really opened up a lot of doors for many, many teachers. The whole idea of Twitter, for instance, Twitter was not established for what teachers use it for. Teachers exchange information and they always have, on videos to watch or books to read or articles to read. And these are the types of information that they exchange and have always exchanged. Twitter has enabled them to do that pretty much on a global scale in very short 140 characters. And as a result, Twitter has said the most number of tweets they ever get on Twitter are education tweets. Not that they have a majority of educators on there, but educators are very prolific in tweeting, so that many educators tweet out many different tweets, and that's how they're exchanging many of the things that they're talking about. And once again, it is social media, so as much as they use it professionally, they also use it socially, and they build up those relationships. One of the things that I was able to do, Steve Anderson is in the audience there. Steve and I never met. He was in North Carolina. I was in New York, and we worked with Shelley Terrell, who was in Germany at the time. The three of us formed EdChat, and we never met each other. We won awards with it, and we didn't meet till 6 months after we had it going, and we won awards with it. They brought us to Hollywood, California to talk about it at a conference, and that was the first time we ever met. So these kinds of connections are going on with people trusting other educators based on 140 characters. It's an amazing thing that it's brought that many people together.
It's an amazing testament to the teaching profession
Yes.
and the way that they want to share their knowledge with each other. I don't know of any other profession that is quite so generous
Yes.
with what they know.
That's a
And I-
brilliant point.
The problem we have, though, with teachers, it's something about teachers. I mentioned this to you before. They confuse sharing with bragging. They really don't want to share everything that they do because they think that they're bragging when they do that. And it's a shame because so much is lost until they get over that feeling that they're bragging and begin to share with people and see that their ideas are looked up to by other educators who may be doing the same thing but not in the same way. So they're helping other educators learn their profession. And once they understand that, it just snowballs from that point on.
Got a question?
I wonder,
Wait,
oh,
Question up there.
we have a question.
yes, I'm right here.
Oh, there you are, all right.
I wonder if you could go a little deeper and talk about the difference between a network and an ecosystem and a learning community. So I'm curious on how you can have networks that share information, but building the deep relationships and continuous learning of a learning community is another, in my thinking, another level. So I'm wondering if you could go a little deeper, talk about how one develops a robust and sustainable learning community / ecosystem.
Well, we are a small nonprofit, and we are not of the state, of a district, of the union, but we work with all three and try to transcend those boundaries that are established between those three entities in America. An example, a school district where one teacher from our community, who's part of about several hundred from a particular state, it's Colorado, joined our community about 3 years ago, a virtual community. She was totally unknown in her district of about 3,000 teachers. So it's a pretty good sized school district in the United States, to say the least. Totally unknown. She got connected to other educators that she'd never seen or heard of before. She started testing out some of her own ideas. We helped her start write and go public with her ideas through blogs. She ended up speaking in front of the state legislature, making the case for college and career-ready standards, new assessments, and new professional learning. The next thing you know, her superintendent recognizes her in the district. And now she is helping him change the system of professional learning inside of this school district of 40,000 kids and 3,000 teachers, turning all their instructional coaches who have not been in the classroom in years into hybrid roles, turning their classrooms into learning labs with video cameras for lesson study both face-to-face and virtually. We're doing it from the grassroots. Now, our organization is just looking to have these proof points and then try to make the case to the larger policy community to build a system around that ecosystem so more of this can happen.
We were talking about this before. It's really, you kind of have to work bottom up and top down at the same time, which is kind of crazy, but schools, every single school has its own culture, and districts have their culture. And one of the things that always upset me was working in higher ed. I would have student teachers go in and we would get them through their teacher preparation, and they would be very technology oriented, being able to use technology on their lessons, the best way possible. But once they got placed into a school district with a toxic culture, as we refer to it, that was anti-technology, that was not supportive of technology, it was like they had to go along to get along. So they backed off from everything that they had learned and after a year or two of backing off, it's gone. So we have to work on the culture of each and every school, and it will eventually, get going, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the ecosystems themselves, the strength of them starts at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's the recognising that it does start there, but then understanding that we're also driven, and we have people from above that have policies that need to be enacted as well, and that once you've built that upward swing, then it's convincing to the people above to go, you know what, actually, geez, this is a great idea. This is where we're making it. These teachers are making a difference. We better start thinking about it. Exactly. When we try from the top down, when we first tried this way, it just slowed everything down. And I'm always concerned that what we talk about is not rocket science. It isn't really. We need to go into the classroom and do it and start there rather than thinking that it must start up here all the time and be an external intervention. If we can start coming up from this section, but understanding that, in part of our program, we do the in-service, if you like, with the teachers, but we also do the pre-service. So we actually work with the college, so we train the trainers of the teachers, so that when they go in, it reduces the toxic nature that occurs, so they can see and mentor each other. But I think we underestimate the power of the schools in building those systems. It's just sometimes they just need that extra, we're here. It don't necessarily have to be directed to do it, but it's just having that extra push to do it. And believe me, teachers are awesome. They take the next step and they find the time. But I think, as was mentioned before, the ecosystem has to keep building. So you do need to bring down from the top, and you do need to start engaging with them as you move up through the ministry levels and into the higher government levels, so that policy then supports the teachers. Yeah. So the teachers can then see that they're recognised for who they are, and that's what takes them the next step.
Yeah, that support element is very important. If you've got the leaders of the school supporting teachers who are collaborative and who are sharing, then it picks up, it gives it more weight.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I agree. The top down should actually be to support the teachers in what they do. And really just do that and back off. And I think that's what people just cannot do. People in power cannot back off. They can't just facilitate. They feel they have to interfere. And I think that's probably where it all goes wrong.
It's control.
It is control, yeah. They cannot
Control and compliance is what we have been built on as an education system. Everybody has to sit in rows and everybody has to do what they're told. Teachers do what they're told by their principals or head teachers. I mean, and that's the way it's been.
Yeah, and if you look at the fact that, Finland's one of the examples we keep looking at is in terms of being decentralised, in terms of where you're giving the teachers the trust to be able to monitor what they do. And I think it comes back to this ecosystem that, in a sense, there's this one big piece, and then there's the learning communities that happen around it. And they might be lots of them, but that's what makes that whole cluster, and that's what moves a nation forward in terms of, and moving them out of poverty and moving them into peace and so forth. Yeah.
Stephen Anderson, learning evangelist and Tom's bodyguard. So it's interesting you talk about this top-down approach, because that's kind of where I was going. And I asked this in the last session to the Gates Foundation about leadership, that I think the biggest hurdle to overcome are not teachers, because we clearly know teachers want to innovate, teachers want to collaborate, teachers want to work together. Leaders don't want them to, because teachers working together are powerful. And so I think that there's a lot of apprehension from school leaders and district leaders and communities all across the globe, where they want teachers to do better, but they want them to do better in their way. So many times prescripted professional development is the norm. So for example, my wife is a math teacher. She's getting ready to go to work right now in North Carolina. And she got an email this week saying, here are the required courses that you have to take as a math teacher through the rest of the school year. And she's looking at them and she says, this is not what I need. I need something different. And has been told over and over again, no, you don't. The district tells you what you need. Teachers all across the world are facing this from their system, saying, this is how you will teach. This is how you will do your PD. yet we don't have enough teachers banding together and say, no, we won't. It's small. There's a small movement growing on Twitter, and there's a small movement growing through social media, but until that leadership hurdle is overcome, that is the biggest challenge is our superintendents, school principals, headmasters, those folks that don't believe in that collaborative model. So the question is, how do you change that?
Can I?
Don't you think that's where those hybrid roles are so important?
If you have leaders who believe in those hybrid roles.
I also think that data is an important part of this, right? Data to empower both the teachers to make their good decisions about where they're struggling, as well as school leaders themselves, right? So whether you're talking about the school leader or at the teacher level, neither can make good informed decisions if they're not clear on, hey, this is where my children are struggling persistently. And so this is an area where I could use some additional assistance, learning, growing. And same thing at the school leadership level, which is this is where my kids across the school or the district. So a lot of this, I think, starts from a lack of performance data or usage of performance data at all levels, from the school level down to the classroom level.
Okay, we've got one there, and then we're going to come over here.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited about the networking idea. I'm first a teacher and a teacher trainer, but I've been a part of two models that really work. I've been in education 30 years, so I've seen a lot. But one was a blue ribbon school in upstate New York, where 16 times a year we released students early, and teachers had PD, and it never came from outside. It was a collaboration. It was a collaborative model. It was all with teacher teams, and but if you raise that idea anywhere, people, I just think it's crazy to let children go that many times, leave, and yet that was a blue ribbon school. It won all kinds of awards because we took time to gain time, and it did. It gained. You cannot, and I train teachers now. You cannot work a full day with anywhere from 30 to 50 children, and then sit down and have a PD that's going to be the best. And you wouldn't do that to doctors. You wouldn't do that to lawyers. You wouldn't say work your full day and then come after school, after work. This is where we don't teach. We don't treat teachers like professionals and people. You know, their days are so long and hard. So that was one. The other one, there's this house foundation in Saudi Arabia, and they pay teachers $80,000 US a year. And I went to their presentation. It was fantastic. And he said, it's all about a growth mindset. Right. Teachers do their own action plans, their own research, and you take the clipboard out of the teacher evaluation. Stop going in. Again, you don't do this to doctors, engineers, lawyers. You don't go in with a clipboard to a doctor's office to see how he's doing. Only teachers are subject to this kind of evaluation. And so these are my comments. And I really, really love your networking and what you're doing for teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the policy side, imagine what it'd be like, and I'm not sure how many countries here are represented that have teacher evaluation systems in place that are formal. But in many cases, like in the States and the UK, those evaluation systems look at a very narrow range of issues. Imagine if our evaluation systems of teachers valued the most the spread of their expertise. What if teachers got the most credit, if you will, or recognition for not just what they did in their classroom, but how they helped other teachers? If that was part of the accountability system, we could start driving some of this in the right direction.
Can I just follow up on that comment as well? In terms of, I think it's also got to do with the community. The community but the parents of that community were supportive of letting those the number of kids home at a time. I know that's difficult. I've got 3 kids, so letting them go halfway through the day, it's hard for me to manage it. But if you've got a community, which is...
not like it. I will tell you, working parents did not like it.
No.
But they fought to get homes in that school district because it was that
Correct. That's right. So you bring them around. In a sense, you bring them around because what ends up happening is the school improvement occurs, quality of life, the whole lot. And I think it also comes down to the fact that I don't think leaders don't want to do this change. I just don't think they know how to. And that comes back to use of data and understanding the use of data to go, you know what, this is a better use of pedagogy or teaching at this time. So the ecosystem gets broader if you like, and the network gets broader. And I think we've got to remember there's lots of little dots, but they've all got to join up, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure the student's getting better, and and that's why we do it. We do it for the kids. So if we're all got that same mindset and move in that direction, then unfortunately not all of us remember that. That, you know, yes, I love teaching and I love teachers and we want them to be the best, but we do it because we want the kids to be the way. That's why we're here, yeah? So I think it's part of that bigger ecosystem, and some schools don't take a while to make that community, and it means that they've got to go out there and as a school and engage that community more, which they forget is powerful. Because when you've got a community that is involved in the school, you tend to find that their results are much better. Yeah?
That's all part of, once again, that's all part of the culture.
Absolutely.
We're going to get to you just 1 second. Do you think when an administrator becomes an administrator that their goals change as an educator? In that they're now worried about the way the school looks, they're worried about things working through, they're worried about not having problems, they're worried about budget, they're worried about everything in the world except for the kids.
Yeah, I mean, and it comes back to a comment you made earlier in terms of, are the teachers, are they teaching as well, are the tutors teaching as well? And I think that as an ex-principal or former principal myself, one of the things I found difficult was get back into the class. But you know what? That was the thing that made the biggest difference, is for me to actually go back to the classroom and see what it's like. And the teachers then saw me in there. I didn't have to necessarily tape a little pad and do the ticks and all that sort of stuff. But it was difficult to do. Don't get me wrong, it's difficult because the administrator or the head has got all these other things they've got to tick through. They've got the board, they've got all the other pressures. But they must find that time to go and visit those classrooms, not only for the kids' sake, but also for the teachers.
So if you had more teacher leaders, you could,
Correct.
the
Absolutely.
task could be
It's
distributed
another way to
more.
build it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we haven't really talked about, I think about it as specialization, which is, you know, someone brought up doctors. We don't expect every heart surgeon to not just do the heart surgery, but to invent the next version of the heart surgery. We have specialists, you know, who are doing research, they're practicing, they're also obviously doing the work themselves, but then disseminating that information to a much larger network of practitioners. And I think within the education realm, we sometimes are afraid of separating out practitioners from researchers, et cetera, and connecting them in valuable ways, as opposed to saying every teacher must invent how to teach X subject.
That's a great point.
And in in very few fields do we do that, except education tends to have a large concentration of that.
Okay. Oh, you gave up the microphone? Okay, we'll move on to the next person.
I'm Ed Dorrell. I'm deputy editor of the TES and Anne's bodyguard.
I don't need one.
No, I thought you'd say that. There's an elephant in the room, I'd say, with all this talk of ecosystems, professional development, teacher networks, are the teacher unions. Do you think all this stuff has appeared because the unions have lost their way? Because I would have thought a classical trade union should deal in teacher networks, mutual support, professional development, that kind of thing.
Well, many unions around the world actually do this work. In Finland and Singapore, parts of the National Education Association in the United States does some of this work, but particularly in the United States, the union there, I would characterize as they play mostly defense because of the politics, and they don't have many of their resources dedicated to helping their members learn and lead. I will say I'm proud of a partnership we've just established with them, with the school reform community too, to help them do just that, to focus a little bit more on the leadership part and spreading pedagogical expertise. So it can happen. We've got to work toward it as partners.
We need a microphone? Right there? Oh,
Sorry.
do you have a question? Okay.
Yeah, Linda Rush, Director of Teacher Training for GEMS in UAE. This notion of ecosystem kind of suggests that something happens naturally, this kind of more intricative, more collaborative way of working and learning from bottom up happens naturally, yet I don't think it does, because it demands quite sophisticated ways of being as a learner, to do with being resourceful, reflective, resourceful, and that notion of reciprocity, knowing when to work on your own and when to work with others. And so I think there are implications in terms of teacher training and taking a split screen approach to not just what it means to promote learning in others, but how the process of becoming a good learner and modelling that as well. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are in and around
I wrote a
that.
book about that.
Ah.
Yeah, we have to work on the mindset of educators.
Yeah.
It has to be, you know, if we talk about the growth mindset, that's what we need. And many educators do not have that. Because once again, we are all products of a 20th century education.
Absolutely.
And 20th century education did not emphasize that. So we've got 21st century learners. What we need now are 21st century educators. And it does require a digital literacy. And many educators are not comfortable with gaining that literacy. So consequently, we're going to wind up with many illiterate educators in that regard. We've got to avoid that. And one way to ease people into this is through these social media connections, to make it a little easier for teachers to accept it. We have this thing called lurking and learning. If you, till you get to learn the culture of social media, you join social media, you watch it, you see what's going on for a while. You don't get involved until you know all the rules. And then once you know the rules and you get involved, the learning curve goes right up.
And of course, this has all implications for those leading the learning too. And we've already sort of noted the barriers associated with the style of leadership. It demands a different quality and style of leadership.
The two nations in the world that have the best reputation for pre-service teacher education, those two nations are Finland and Singapore. And their models are one reason why I believe deeply in the professionalization of teachers worldwide. And what they do, more than anything else well, is they prepare future teachers as action researchers, inquirers. They help them develop a growth mindset, a collaborative, disciplined inquiry, looking at data and evidence, Jay, in ways that no other country does at scale. And it pays off. And I don't believe we're going to go from where we are today with like 55 or 60 million teachers worldwide like this. But if we did have a more systematic investment in that type of teacher and then gave them time and space to help their colleagues, then I do think we can literally change the world.
There are many schools now that are looking to incorporate collaboration time into the work week for teachers, you know, to give them the time to collaborate. You know, as an educator, I believe that we have a moral obligation to share things. That's what I do. I learn and I share. What would happen if there was a doctor who discovered a cure for cancer and didn't share it? You know, that just doesn't make sense. And we as educators, we work with information and we work with learning. So why wouldn't we share it? That's what we do. And social media has set us up to do that. And you have to remember that if you have an idea and you don't share it, it's just a passing thought. It doesn't go beyond your own head. So we really have to share these things out. We have a question in the back. Oh, we have one right here, and then we'll go to, no, you're good, and then we're going to go to you after that. And then you.
I'm Ramya Venkatraman from the Center for Teacher Accreditation, and I'm asking this question with a bias, of course. But as I hear this discussion, there is a lot of how do we get teachers to collaborate? How do we get the system to put certain things in place? How do we make school leaders aligned with that? Are there models where you have seen the market making some of these things happen? Ultimately, in a profession like doctors or engineers, it's not as if somebody is designing a system out there to make collaboration or other things happen. The market makes it happen because a doctor's own value increases when he or she collaborates or goes through professional development, etc. So have you seen that, and is that something that some of you might be thinking about?
The policy side of our work, we advocate for teachers who demonstrate the evidence and help their colleagues get paid more, but we can't get the politicians in the United States to invest in teachers in that way. Not yet, but we will get there.
No, in fact, my question is why the politicians or why the government, isn't there a market-led way of saying that schools that invest in this are able to signal that to parents, and parents therefore realize that this makes sense and I should be choosing this school over the other one. And of course, I also realize that there are countries where the school choice doesn't exist. So it probably depends partly on that.
But I think your example of, no one goes to a doctor or hospital because they collaborate, right? They go to a doctor or hospital because they have a high success rate and low mortality and, in surgeries, et cetera. So, I mean, the analogy here, I think, is people go, if there is choice, people choose a school based upon learning outcomes. If the school believes that the best way to achieve those learning outcomes is increased collaboration, but if the school believes that the way to achieve those outcomes is something else, that, from a market perception, the market doesn't care about teacher collaboration. The market cares about learning outcomes.
Where was we had, right there, okay.
Hi. Oh, okay. So I had two comments to make. The first was, I'm actually fortunate enough to be working in a system now where we are given ample collaboration time, and having come from a system where I did not have that, I can vouch for the difference it has made in my teaching, in my learning, in my general professional development. I had a question/comment. I'm all for virtual collaboration. I use it myself regularly. But I also, to play devil's advocate, I guess, have seen not all ideas are created equal. And I do find it can be frustrating. You're on these virtual communities and you can spend time trudging through things that perhaps are not useful. And so I just wonder, how do you moderate, a community where you want to collaborate and you want to share with ideas that maybe shouldn't be shared? Sounds very exclusive and elitist, but it's a reality, so it's tough to moderate that, and I guess it's something to just be conscious of. We want to promote this community of collaboration, but we also need to recognize that there is there are good things and there are maybe not such good things that are shared.
Can I answer that one? Because that is an issue that's always thrown at us. Some people have some really rubbish ideas, and they load them up onto the site. But the great thing is, other teachers are there, and they say that's a rubbish idea, and it goes to the bottom. So when somebody is searching for it, it never comes up.
Self-moderates.
It's self-moderating, and again, it's about trusting the teachers. The teachers know. They can see a rubbish idea, and they'll put them straight. And sometimes the comments really are hurtful to that person.
But I think good teachers know that it's a rubbish idea.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that bad teachers don't. I think they learn it. But having come in, fresh out of college and not knowing what I was doing, and knowing what I was doing but still learning, and not having a collaborative community around me like I do now, it was something that was hard for me to mediate, because you don't know. You're new. You're 22 and you just finished school and you think everything's great. So it's just important.
That's all part of growing up.
My point was that it's important to remember that
Yeah.
when we're creating these communities.
One of the things that I'd like to point out, though, is, when we talk about these communities, we refer to them as connected communities. The really good ideas happen in the connected communities first. Before you see them in the faculty room, before you hear about them at a faculty meeting, before some department sits down, these ideas are being discussed in the connected community, because that's where the thought leaders in education are, that's where the authors are, that's where the really collaborative teachers are, and that's where these ideas are emanating from. And based on that, blog posts are being done as a result of that. So that's more of a connection. And once again, we talked about bring your own device, the BYOD thing. We talked about the flipped classroom. Flipped classroom was discussed probably a year before anybody even knew what it was in the brick and mortar world. It was amazing. So that's kind of like the place to be if you think of yourself as an innovative teacher.
I think also this, pushes towards being both excited and open to measuring performance within the classroom, right? So if you're measuring pupil growth within classrooms, and we have that more broad-based in classrooms all over the world, then you're going to be, if you're submitting your idea or your new twist on the lesson plan to one of these networks, you would be presenting the evidence that you've also gathered about the efficacy of it. Then obviously there'll be a debate over the specific measurement, but it has to start with there's measurement, because it's not just, hey, I had this idea, you should try it. It's, this worked in my classroom. I have evidence of this working in my classroom. This is something that you should take a look at.
Well, and this also suggests why we need better teacher preparation from the get-go, from the beginning, because teachers need more preparation and assessment literacy
Surely.
that they don't have now to drive the changes that you're describing. So we got to invest in teacher education.
You know, the other thing too is that we have to realize that we are now in a culture that is computer driven, and things change more rapidly than ever before. I got a degree in I got a master's degree in educational technology in 1990. Not one piece of hardware or software that I got that degree on is even in existence today. So in order for me to stay relevant, I have to be connected. And everything that we do and everything that we teach now is changing like that. It used to take decades for things to change. Now they change overnight. Look at the countries. We're renaming countries because they're changing constantly. In order to stay up with the changes, we really have to stay relevant and be connected. And that's all part of what it is we do. Yeah, we've got like 3 minutes left, so if you've been thinking about a question, you may want to get it in now.
My question is that, Confucius said that don't give a man a fish, teach a man how to fish. And I wonder that we get together and we're talking about teaching ecosystems, but then we also don't take into account the diversity, the cultural aspect of a sustainable teaching ecosystem. What I mean to say is that teach a man how to fish, but in some countries, there's no water. How do you teach a man how to fish? First, you need to bring water so that there's marine life, there is fish, then you teach a man how to fish. So what I'm trying to say is that in the part of the world, like let's say Southeast Asia, in Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and a lot of Africa, I have personally seen, including Vietnam and Cambodia, that the teachers are not accredited through QTS or through qualified teacher status or coming out of teaching and regulatory authorities. But still those teachers are much better, and they're passionate teachers. And if you look at the learning outcomes, as what Jay mentioned, in terms of achievement and excellence and grades, they tend to prepare better students for the universities that they're looking for. So a lot of talk has been done, but there's no mention of coaching, counseling, mentoring. And in a kind of world we are living in, we are talking a lot about marriage counseling, drug counseling, but what about the influence of coaching, counseling, mentoring within the school, and how to deal with cultural, social, religious diversities in education, the so-called underprivileged half of the world? Thank you.
I'll just quickly say I don't think it's going to start necessarily in those countries, but again, if we could get at least some of these devices in the hands of teachers all over the world and connect them with teachers who are here at this conference, those 50 finalists and who knows how many hundreds of thousands of others who could be helpful, then I think it can start there.
Can I just add a comment to that as well? It comes back to what we mentioned earlier. Certainly agree with some of what you've said, but I think it's got to be contextualised. Yeah? So if you're teaching a man how to fish in the sea, that's awesome, but not in the middle of the desert. So you might use a camel instead. So I think it's a matter of finding the right systems that work within it, but coaching, mentoring, all those aspects, absolutely agree with you. You need to be part of building that collaborative nature of teachers and their worth. But I think it's important that we remember there is contextualised nature. We can't, one hat doesn't fit all. And if we keep remembering that as we move around the world, hopefully we'll understand the cultural difference. We'll definitely look at, it's part of that belief that you know where I'm coming from. When teachers get trained, they need to know who's training them actually has some experience within that country. As I said, the Mzungu doesn't have to be there. I might help train somebody to do it, but those teachers are the ones that actually know exactly how to contextualise the knowledge. So absolutely agree with some of your comments, but just remember we can do it, and it is there. It's just giving these teachers that belief, that collective and personal belief that they can actually do the difference as well. They don't have to wait for people from above to tell them what to do. Yeah?
We've got about 12 seconds. We have one more question.
Sorry, that's not a question. This is just, I agree with him. This is not a question of sharing only. This is a question of motivating, because some teachers, they don't have the knowledge, and knowledge is changing. So it's important to motivate the students in order for them to search and to be able to learn from many things, not only from their teachers.
Absolutely. I agree.
I see by the old clock on the wall, it's time to say goodbye.
Can I just before we go, can I ask one question? Who teaches here? Who's in the classroom? Can you stand up? You're actually in the classroom today. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah? Because, we've just celebrated only 10 people, but and that's awesome people, but this conference is about you. And I can't remember which one of the contestants actually mentioned the fact that just tell them that I taught yesterday. Yeah. To me that's an awesome, thank you. And it was the winner. Quite right, sorry, my mistake. However, this is what we're here for, teacher advocacy, and to get out there and say that you're doing an awesome job and we're going to help you get there. So, thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank the panel for here, and I'd like to thank all the participants. Thank you all very much.